She froze. That's the only way I can describe it. I was standing in line at a pretzel stand, fumbling for my wallet, when I felt a pair of eyes burn into me from across the food court. I looked up, and there she was, Clara. 2 years. 2 years of silence. And suddenly she was 10 feet away, holding a toddler's hand, looking like she'd seen a ghost. My heart slammed against my ribs. I didn't expect to see her again, not here, not like this. I wasn't ready. Not that I'd ever be ready. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, lighter, and she wore this expensive-looking coat I'd never seen before. But her eyes, those gray eyes I used to get lost in, they were wide, almost terrified. I stood there like an idiot, my pretzel order completely forgotten. I wanted to say something clever, something that would make me look like I'd moved on, like I wasn't still the man she'd walked out on. But all that came out was a pathetic, "Clara?" She didn't answer. She just stood there, clutching the kid's hand like it was a lifeline. And then I realized, that must be her child, the one she'd had with him. I don't know what I felt in that moment. Anger? Sadness? A weird, twisted kind of curiosity. All I know is that time slowed down. People brushed past me, the smell of fried food filled the air, and I couldn't stop staring at her. She looked down at her kid, then back at me, and I swear I saw something flicker across her face. Regret. Or maybe I was imagining it, like I've imagined a million other things in the past 2 years. I didn't move toward her. Not yet. I wanted to see what she'd do. And that's when something strange happened. She turned to the side, whispering something to the child, but her hands were trembling. Almost like she was scared of me. Why would she be scared of me? I'm the guy who cried in the shower for months after she left. The guy who couldn't even look at her photos without falling apart. Something in my gut told me this wasn't just a casual run-in. There was something she wasn't saying, something hidden behind those wide, frozen eyes. And that was the moment I decided I wasn't going to just let her walk away again. She turned her back on me like I was some stranger, scooping up the child and walking away fast, too fast, as if seeing me was the last thing she wanted. My chest tightened. I don't know what came over me, but I couldn't just let her vanish again. Not after everything. I threw the pretzel bag onto the counter, muttered something to the confused cashier, and started following her through the crowded mall. I wasn't thinking straight. My legs were moving before my brain caught up. I weaved through people, trying to keep my eyes on her blonde hair bobbing just above the crowd. She glanced over her shoulder once, and the look on her face wasn't anger or annoyance. It was fear. Real fear. And that hit me like a punch. Why would she be scared of me? I'm not the guy who left. I'm the guy she left behind. The fool who spent nights begging a ceiling for answers that never came. She stopped abruptly in front of a toy store. Her kid tugged at her hand, pointing excitedly at something in the window. For a moment, I thought she'd turn, maybe even talk to me. But she didn't. She pulled out her phone instead, dialing someone with shaking hands. I couldn't hear what she said, but her voice sounded sharp, panicked. She glanced at me again, and I swear I saw her mouth the words, "He's here." What did that mean? Who was she calling? My stomach twisted. I should have walked away right then, but something about the whole scene felt wrong. It wasn't just the awkwardness of bumping into an ex. This was something darker. I wanted answers, even if I wasn't ready to hear them. I ducked behind a pillar, watching as she scooped up her kid and disappeared into the toy store. My heart was pounding like I'd just committed a crime. A part of me told me I should leave her alone, that I'd already lost my dignity once with her and didn't need to lose it again in a public place. But the other part, the part that still had scars from how she left, needed to know why she looked at me like I was the problem. That's when I noticed a man in a black jacket standing a few feet away from the toy store entrance. He wasn't shopping. He wasn't even pretending to look at anything. He was just watching her. Watching us. When she came out of the store, their eyes met for half a second, and I saw her flinch. She didn't greet him. She didn't smile. She just grabbed her kid tighter and kept walking. Something about that guy made my skin crawl. He looked rough, not in the way of someone who worked hard, but in the way of someone who'd been in too many fights and won just enough to stay mean. My instincts screamed at me, "Follow them." I followed them at a distance, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and anger. Clara moved quickly, like she was trying to outrun something or someone, and the man in the black jacket wasn't far behind. He didn't look like the kind of guy you'd forget if you saw him once. Thick neck, heavy jaw, the kind of eyes that scan a room like he's hunting something. I couldn't tell if he was with her or after her. Either way, She wasn't acting like a woman out on a casual mall trip with her child. She kept glancing over her shoulder, clutching the little boy's hand so tight I could see his tiny knuckles turn pale. We passed a row of stores, and I caught glimpses of our reflections in the polished glass. I looked like a complete lunatic, a man chasing his ex-wife, face pale and tense, trying to piece together a puzzle I didn't even understand. Every rational part of me told me to turn around, to let her live her life, but I couldn't. Something about the way she'd frozen when she first saw me, that wasn't guilt or embarrassment. That was fear, and I needed to know why. They reached the parking garage, and my stomach sank. This wasn't a good idea. Parking garages are where bad things happen, places where the echoes of footsteps make you feel like you're being hunted. I slowed down, keeping behind a row of cars, watching them head toward a silver SUV. Clara fumbled for her keys with shaky hands. The man in the black jacket stopped a few cars away, leaning casually against a concrete pillar, but his eyes were locked on her. It wasn't casual at all. That's when something snapped inside me. I wasn't going to just stand there like the same pathetic guy she'd left behind, watching her walk into another mess. I took a deep breath, walked straight toward her, and said, "Clara, wait." She jumped like I just fired a gun. The boy, maybe 2 years old, hid behind her legs, his wide brown eyes staring at me like I was a stranger. "Walter, don't," she hissed, her voice low and urgent. "Just go. Please. You shouldn't be here." "I shouldn't be here." My voice cracked. "Clara, you left me like I was garbage on the curb. And now you act like I'm the one who's not supposed to be here? What's going on? Who is that guy?" I pointed to the man in the jacket, who was now watching our little scene with an unsettling smirk. Her face went pale. She glanced at him, then back at me, and whispered so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "He's not supposed to see you. If he does, we're both in trouble." I froze. "What does that mean?" I demanded, but before she could answer, the man started walking toward us. His steps were slow, deliberate, like a predator who knows you can't run fast enough to escape. Clara's eyes widened, and she shoved a piece of paper into my hand so fast I barely had time to react. "Take it. Leave now, Walter. Please, just go. Don't ask questions." But I didn't move. I couldn't. And in that split second of hesitation, the man reached us. The man stopped a few feet away from us, and for a moment, no one spoke. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a presence that felt wrong, like the air itself had tightened around him. His black jacket was worn and frayed at the cuffs, and I noticed something in his hand, just out of sight, like he was clutching something small but heavy. His eyes shifted between me and Clara, and then they settled on me with a kind of quiet contempt, as if I'd just made a very serious mistake by existing here. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice low and even, but with this sharp edge that made the hair on my neck stand up. Clara's grip on her kid tightened, and I could see her knuckles turning white. "No, there's no problem," she said quickly, her tone trembling in a way I'd never heard before. She tried to smile, but it looked like her face was breaking in half. "We were just leaving." I didn't move. My instincts told me this man wasn't someone you just ignore, but every part of me wanted to ask, "Who the hell are you?" Instead, I said, "Clara, we need to talk. I don't know what's going on, but..." The man cut me off with a single look, the kind that stops you mid-sentence without a word. "You should go," he said to me. Not a suggestion, not advice, a command. Something inside me, probably that same stubborn, broken part that still hadn't healed from when she left, flared up. "I don't know who you are," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But this is between me and her. Back off." The silence that followed was unbearable. Clara's eyes darted between us, her breathing fast and shallow. I realized then that this wasn't just about me being the bitter ex-husband. There was something darker at play here, something she was too terrified to say out loud. The man took a single step forward. "Last warning," he said, and for a brief second, I thought he might actually do something, grab me, hit me, I don't know. My body froze. I'm not a fighter. I never have been. I'd be lying if I said my legs didn't want to run. But then Clara spoke, her voice shaking. "Please, Walter. Just go. Please." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the desperation in her eyes. Not the kind of desperation from someone who regrets the past. No, this was fear, raw and unfiltered, like she was begging me to save myself before I got tangled in something I couldn't get out of. I backed up slowly, my fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to scream at her to explain, to tell me why this man was standing between us like a wall, but I couldn't. As I walked away, I opened my hand and looked at the piece of paper she'd shoved into it. There was a single line scrawled in her handwriting, "Don't call me. Don't follow me. I'll find you." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. What the hell had she gotten into? And why did I feel like, after all this time, I wasn't just dealing with a broken marriage anymore? I was dealing with something much bigger and far more dangerous. I drove home with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight that my fingers hurt. My brain was replaying the scene in the parking garage on a loop, dissecting every detail. Her trembling voice, the way that man looked at me like I was already a problem to be dealt with, and that note, short and terrifying in its own way. "Don't call me. Don't follow me. I'll find you." Those weren't words of a woman who moved on and was living her happily ever after with a new guy and a kid. No, those were the words of someone who was running from something. Or maybe someone. When I got home, I sat at the kitchen table for hours, just staring at that note. It felt like my life had gone from pathetic to something out of a crime drama. Except I wasn't the hero. I was the guy who had no idea what was going on, the guy who'd get caught in the crossfire. I kept telling myself to let it go. She wasn't my problem anymore. She'd chosen to leave me, to have a life with another man. But deep down, I knew I'd never let her story end with me being just some forgotten chapter. I loved her once. God help me. I probably still did, and I needed to know what danger she was in. Sleep didn't come that night. I sat on my couch, drinking too much coffee, the TV flickering in the background with news I wasn't listening to. Around 2 a.m., I noticed something odd about the note. The way she'd written the last words, "I'll find you." It looked rushed, like she'd scribbled them while looking over her shoulder. But what really caught me was a faint smudge in the corner, almost like she'd tried to rub something out. I held it under a lamp and saw what looked like the bottom of a number, part of a phone number maybe, but incomplete. It was as if she'd started writing it and then stopped. My gut told me this wasn't accidental. The next day, I did something stupid. I went back to that mall, hoping maybe I'd see her again. Maybe I'd see that man, and maybe I'd find the nerve to ask him what the hell he wanted with my ex-wife. But the mall was just normal. Crowds of teenagers, parents with screaming kids, the smell of pretzels and coffee in the air. I felt like an idiot, standing there with my heart hammering, expecting some cinematic confrontation. As I walked through the parking garage, I spotted a small piece of paper near where her SUV had been parked the day before. I don't know why I picked it up. Maybe I was desperate. Maybe I just wanted anything that could explain the mess in my head. It was a crumpled receipt from a gas station. Nothing remarkable, except for one thing. On the back, in Clara's handwriting, there was a single word, "Run." I froze. My first thought was that maybe it wasn't meant for me. Maybe it wasn't even hers. But I knew her handwriting. I'd seen it on birthday cards, grocery lists, the notes she used to leave me on the fridge before work. And here it was, scrawled like a warning. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about her cheating and leaving me. Something bigger was happening, something she was caught up in that made her too scared to even talk to me. I should have walked away right then, but I couldn't. I couldn't let it go. Because if Clara was in trouble, no matter how much I hated her for what she did, a part of me would always want to protect her. So I made up my mind. I was going to find out what was going on, whether she wanted me to or not. By the time the weekend rolled around, my obsession with Clara's sudden reappearance had reached a level that was starting to scare even me. I couldn't concentrate at work. I barely ate. And every time I tried to convince myself to move on, that word on the back of the receipt echoed in my head. Run. What was she running from? Who was that man in the black jacket? And why did she look at me like my being there could get someone killed? I knew I had to dig deeper. I had no plan, no strategy, just a stubborn, stupid determination that I wasn't going to be left in the dark again. I started by retracing her steps. That same evening, I drove to the gas station listed on the receipt. It was one of those old, run-down places on the edge of town where the lights flicker and the cashiers look like they've seen too much. The guy behind the counter barely looked up from his phone when I walked in. I asked him if he remembered seeing a woman with short blonde hair and a kid a few days ago. He squinted at me, then shrugged. "I see a lot of people," he said. "What's it to you?" I slipped him a 20, hoping money would jog his memory. That's when he said something that made my stomach knot. "Yeah, I remember her. She wasn't alone. Some guy was with her. Big guy. Black jacket. They didn't look like they were together, if you know what I mean. More like he was watching her. She looked nervous. I felt the blood drain from my face. So the man at the mall wasn't just a random stranger. He'd been following her before. And for some reason, she was too scared to call the cops. Or maybe she couldn't. I didn't know which was worse. I pressed him for more details, but he just shook his head and went back to scrolling through his phone like I'd never been there. I left with a pit in my stomach and more questions than I had answers. That night, I made another bad decision. I drove to the neighborhood where Clara used to live. I didn't even know if she still lived there, but part of me thought I'd get lucky. Her old house, the one we once shared, was dark and empty. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, just staring at it like a ghost from my past. Every memory of us in that place flooded back, and for a moment, I almost forgot why I was there. Then, as I was about to leave, I saw movement across the street. A black SUV rolled by slowly, its tinted windows impossible to see through. It didn't stop, but something about the way it moved, like it was scanning the area, sent chills down my spine. Was it connected to the man in the black jacket? Or was I just losing my mind, seeing danger where there wasn't any? I couldn't tell anymore. All I knew was that my gut told me this wasn't a coincidence. When I finally got home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I double-locked my door, checked the windows twice, and sat on the couch with the note Clara gave me in one hand and the crumpled receipt in the other. That's when I noticed something I'd missed before. On the back of the note, in barely visible pencil, were 3 letters. A-L-C. I had no idea what it meant, but it didn't feel random. It felt like a clue she'd left behind, something she couldn't say out loud. I spent the rest of the night scouring the internet, trying to figure out what A-L-C could stand for. I found nothing useful, until I stumbled on a local news article from a year ago about a man named Aaron Langford Cole, a businessman who'd been under investigation for illegal dealings. But the case had mysteriously been dropped. My chest tightened as I read his name again. Aaron. Could it be the same Aaron she left me for? What if he wasn't just some entrepreneur who swept her off her feet? I couldn't shake the thought that Clara wasn't just scared of me seeing her. She was scared of what I might find out. And the terrifying part? I was starting to think I wasn't just chasing my ex-wife anymore. I was walking straight into something that could get me killed. I couldn't get the name Aaron Langford Cole out of my head. The article painted him as a smooth operator, the kind of man who built his fortune through shady deals and consulting for businesses that never seemed to exist on paper. The article mentioned whispers of extortion, offshore accounts, even connections to a string of disappearances that had never been solved. It was the kind of story you read late at night and tell yourself it's all exaggeration, that guys like that don't really live in your world. But now, staring at Clara's scrawled note and remembering the look of sheer terror on her face, I wasn't so sure anymore. The next day, I called an old friend, Paul, a guy I hadn't spoken to in years but who owed me a favor. He worked as a security consultant, the type who knew how to dig up dirt without leaving a trail. I told him I needed information on Aaron Langford Cole, and after a long pause, he simply said, "Why the hell are you messing with someone like him? You have no idea what you're stepping into, Walter. Guys like him don't just ruin lives, they erase people." His voice dropped when he added, "If your ex is tied to him, you need to walk away. Right now." But I didn't walk away. I couldn't. Clara had left me. Yes, but no matter how much I hated admitting it, some part of me still cared about her. And if she was tangled up with a man like Aaron, someone who could make her so scared that she couldn't even look me in the eye, then I couldn't just sit at home and pretend none of this mattered. Paul called me back later that evening with a whisper of a lead. "He owns a warehouse out on the east side," he said. "Nothing official, of course. It's registered under some shell company. People say that's where he keeps things he doesn't want anyone to find." I asked him what kind of things, but Paul just said, "Don't go there. Trust me, you don't want to know." Naturally, I went there. The warehouse was in one of those industrial dead zones, surrounded by broken fences and abandoned buildings with shattered windows. The place looked deserted, but as I crept closer, I noticed a black SUV parked in the corner, identical to the one I'd seen near Clara's old house. My heart started pounding. I wasn't prepared for whatever I was about to find, but I'd already gone too far to turn back. Through a gap in the metal siding, I spotted 2 men loading boxes into the SUV. I couldn't see what was inside the boxes, but they were heavy, and the way the men moved, fast, nervous, looking over their shoulders, told me whatever was inside wasn't legal. Then, just as I was about to leave before I got caught, I saw her. Clara. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't talking. She was just standing there, holding that same toddler on her hip, her face pale and empty like all the life had been drained from her. I don't remember making the decision to stay hidden. My body just froze. Watching her like that felt wrong, like I was spying on someone I didn't even know anymore. She looked smaller somehow, like she was just a shadow of the woman I married. One of the men handed her something, a black duffel bag, and whispered something in her ear. I couldn't hear the words, but the way she stiffened told me they weren't asking her to pick up milk and bread. This was something far more sinister. When they were gone, I just stood there in the dark, my head spinning. What had she gotten herself into? Was this Aaron's operation? Was the man in the black jacket one of his guys, keeping her in line? And, more importantly, why did it feel like I had just seen her on the edge of something she couldn't escape? I drove home that night feeling like I'd stepped into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I tried to tell myself I'd done enough, that I should let her handle her own mess. But then I remembered the words she'd written on that receipt. Run. If she was telling me to run, maybe she was trapped. Maybe she couldn't run herself. And I knew then, as much as I hated myself for it, that I wasn't going to let this go. Not now. Not after what I saw in that warehouse. I knew I couldn't keep sneaking around like this. Watching from the shadows wasn't going to save Clara, and deep down, I realized that I wasn't just trying to help her. I needed closure. I needed to understand what happened to us, to her, and why she looked so terrified every time our paths crossed. So, the next morning, I drove straight back to that warehouse. I had no plan other than to find her and demand the truth. The place was quieter than before. The black SUV was still there, but the men were gone. I circled around to the side and found a door slightly open. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like my ribs might crack, but I pushed inside. It smelled of oil and dust, and the faint sound of voices echoed from the back. I followed the noise until I found her. Clara, sitting on a crate, her son asleep on her lap. She looked up when she saw me, her face a mixture of shock and anger. "Walter, what are you doing here?" she hissed, standing so fast she nearly woke the child. "I told you to stay away. Do you have any idea how dangerous this is?" "Dangerous?" I snapped, louder than I intended. "You left me, Clara. You disappeared from my life without a single real explanation. Then I see you again, and you're terrified, being followed by some thug in a black jacket, scribbling words like run on scraps of paper. Do you think I'm just going to walk away and pretend I didn't see it?" She stared at me, her lips trembling, and for a moment I thought she'd tell me to leave again. Instead, she sat down slowly, and the weight of the past 2 years seemed to crash down on her shoulders. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "Aaron, he isn't who I thought he was. I didn't leave you because I didn't love you. I left because I was stupid enough to fall for his lies, and when I realized what he was really doing, it was too late. He won't let me go, Walter. He won't let me leave with my son." It all hit me like a sledgehammer. She wasn't living a happy life. She wasn't moving on. She was trapped. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in years, I didn't see the woman who betrayed me. I saw someone broken, desperate, and afraid. And I knew I couldn't walk away. Not again. We didn't have much time. The sound of a door slamming somewhere in the building jolted both of us to our feet. I took her hand, ignoring how badly it was shaking, and whispered, "We're leaving. Now." She hesitated, but then nodded, her eyes wide with trust one didn't think she'd ever give me again. I don't know how we pulled it off. Maybe it was luck, maybe it was sheer adrenaline, but we made it to my car before anyone saw us. I drove faster than I've ever driven in my life, not caring where I was going, just needing to put as much distance as possible between us and that warehouse. Clara cried quietly in the passenger seat, clutching her son like he was the only thing keeping her alive. The next few weeks were a blur. We went to the police, and with Paul's help, he had some contacts who weren't afraid of Aaron. Clara was able to give them enough information to open a serious case. Aaron's empire wasn't as untouchable as he thought. By some miracle, or maybe just because he'd finally crossed the wrong people, he was arrested within days of the investigation kicking off. Clara was free. And me? I don't know how to describe it. I thought I'd feel bitter, or smug, or maybe even broken all over again. But instead, I just felt relieved. For the first time in years, I could breathe. Clara and I aren't back together in some romantic, fairy tale way. Too much has happened for that. But we're talking again, really talking, and I can see a different kind of future now, one where we're both free from the past, and maybe even friends. The last time I saw her, we met for coffee. Her son was playing with a toy truck on the table, and she looked at me with this soft, tired smile. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You saved us." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Because maybe, after everything, I finally saved myself too.